All right, let's talk about David Click here. Enforcement. Interpretation of the rules. The authority having jurisdiction is responsible for interpreting the NEC, but the decision must be based on a specific NEC requirement. This is the one rule I hear many inspectors say, or people say that inspectors say, well, listen, I'm the inspector. I'm the one that tells you how to do it. You have to do, what I tell you. If not, you don't get your final. You know, power is an illusion. So people need to be responsible with what they do. The code recognizes that there are going to be issues that, example, shall be permitted as long as it's not subject to physical damage. Well, you know what? We have 5 team members here, plus myself and Mike and everybody else in this room here. We can all look at one application, and we can split that down the middle. 3 guys say, yeah, it's subject for sure, because I can think of a scenario. And 3 other guys are like, what are you talking about? It's up on a roof, and it's on an angle with the pitch of the roof. Nobody's going to be up there. So when you get into those kind of areas, I tell contractors, you make your presentation, and then you wait, and you look to see what the answer is, and you say, okay, boss, and then you go. I mean, there's nothing more you can do. When it's a judgment call, the authority having jurisdiction, but what the authority having jurisdiction cannot do is say, well, I want you to put a disconnect up on that location, or I want you to do this, I want you to do that, when there is no rule. The authority having jurisdiction is responsible to interpret the rules, so they can't just make up their own rule. The next thing is the authority having jurisdiction is approval of equipment. Only the AHJ, the authority having jurisdiction, has the authority to approve equipment and material. Approval is typically based on product listing. Now, you guys are all rookies on this DVD team, so I have to ask you questions because I don't know where you guys stand because you all come from a different world. If a product is listed, does that mean it's approved?
No.
Depends on the application.
No, just a simple question.
No.
If a product is listed, does that mean it's approved? Brian.
No.
Ryan.
Not if the AHJ doesn't approve it.
They're encouraged to accept testing from
All right, forget
testing
it.
labs.
Next one, Dave.
It could still be installed incorrectly, so not necessarily.
No, it doesn't matter whether it's listed or not. What matters is the product has to be approved. And approval can only be by the authority having jurisdiction. Generally, they base their approval on the fact that something is listed. But the fact that it's listed doesn't mean the inspector is going to approve it. And also, a non-listed product could be approved. Now, watch this. This is a subtle point. Sometimes the code specifically says you shall use a listed product. That's not being approved. It says utility interactive inverter shall be listed, or the components of a photovoltaic system shall be listed. Well, the modules then have to be listed. There's no approval here. The code didn't say it shall be approved. It says it shall be listed. So if the authority having jurisdiction sees a listed product, he might not approve it though. He might say, no, I'm not going to approve that inverter. So you'd have to do what? Find another inverter that's what?
Approved.
No, that's listed. And see if he will approve that. So if the code requires a listed product, you have to have a listed product. But the authority having jurisdiction decides whether he approves or she approves it or not. And same thing on any installation. It has to be approved. So Article 100, read the definition and take a look at it. Once you know what approval means, then you go to 90.4. The authority having jurisdiction is the one that makes the decision on approval. The easiest thing is when you have listed products, the inspectors pretty much say, okay, not a problem, unless they have some kind of personal experience with a specific product, they would say no. Let's go on to waiver of rules. The authority having jurisdiction can waiver requirements in the code or permit alternative methods where it's assured that equivalent safety can be achieved and maintained. I think this rule we're going to use in the next couple of days. I tell you why. The NEC, chapters 1 through 4, that's been around for 100-something years, and it's based upon wires having current being pushed by voltage and, you know, coming from the electric utility. And then only recently, 690, when I say recent, I'm like, the fact that it's been there since 1984 doesn't really mean anything to us because we never paid attention to it. We didn't have to do with it. We didn't care what these guys were doing. All of a sudden realized, you know, that seems like there's a market there. These guys, you know, we need to take that market back. And so now we got to realize, okay, let's start looking at 690 and see what the heck 690 says. And we're like, and when you really get into 690, like we will today and tomorrow, or the next 2 DVDs, you're going to find out there's some code rules that are That doesn't make any sense at all. It really is not practical. All you can do when you get to a rule that this rule was never intended to be applied this way, and it doesn't make any sense, and we'll see how. All you can do is go to the authority having jurisdiction and say, Dave, look, here's the situation, here's how it is, and it has to be in writing. So you have to submit it in writing. Article 100 talks about special permission. I better make sure that it's in my textbook. And that is get it in writing. And then the authority having jurisdiction. Dave, can you think of a scenario you've ever waived a rule that it could be, it's safe. It's not exactly the code. Anybody here think of a scenario that?
Yeah, right. Actually, my own personal system at home, working with the inspector, there's a requirement for additional grounding electrode off of PV systems in the 2008 code. It's going away in 2011. We looked at the system, walked through it, didn't meet specifically the word by word for code, but he deemed it was a safe installation the way I had installed the grounding electrode.
Now, did you get it in writing?
Yes. He put it on his inspection report.
Okay. Brian?
You know, Mike, the flip side for me has been, and we're talking about inspectors, they'll come up with this crazy stuff, and you said they can't make their own stuff up. Well, if you ask them, hey, I need that in writing so that, you know, we can actually do something that we don't believe is code, about 90% of the time, they'll come back to you and say, you know, we've looked at this a little further, and we don't need to issue it in writing, but here's what we believe the code says. And a lot of times they'll actually come in line with what the black and white version of the code is. And
so it's just the opposite of what you're saying.
Exactly.
Get it in writing, say, listen, you want me to do something that I think is unsafe, and that happens. Give me that in writing so that I can cover my butt because I think it's unsafe
Right.
and I think it's violating the code. But listen, what can I do? You're telling me I have to do it. I need to get a final. You give it me in writing. I'm going to put it in there. All right. All right, so there could be a scenario, and the code does provide that provision because it recognizes that, you know, something can happen. Here's the next one, 90.4. Waiver of new product requirements. If the code requires products that aren't yet available, the authority having jurisdiction can allow products that were acceptable in the previous code. I think we actually have that. So we're probably going to end up using this rule a little later on and in the next DVD. So recognize. Next one. Compliance with listing instructions. It's the authority having jurisdiction's responsibility to ensure that the equipment is installed in accordance with equipment listings and or labeling instructions. So whatever the instructions are, it's important that we follow that.